The morning sun filtered through the rough-hewn logs of the cabin, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor where Sarah Mitchell sat at the edge of the bed, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to steady her breathing. She had been traveling for 3 days now, running from a past that seemed determined to follow her no matter how far she rode. The small ranch she had stumbled upon the previous evening had seemed like a sanctuary at first, with its neat fences and well-tended fields, but now in the harsh light of morning she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Thomas Brennan stood in the doorway, his weathered face unreadable as he studied the young woman before him. He was a man in his late 50s with silver threading through his dark hair and lines etched deep around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. His hands were calloused from a lifetime of honest work, and there was something in his bearing that spoke of both strength and sorrow. Sarah had collapsed near his barn the night before, exhausted and half-starved, and he had carried her inside without hesitation. Now she faced him knowing that she owed him an explanation, but terrified of what might happen when he learned the truth. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I beg you, just let me rest here for one more day and then I will be gone. I promise I will not bring any trouble to your door." Thomas walked slowly into the room, his boots heavy on the floorboards, and Sarah flinched instinctively, expecting anger or worse. But when he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle though firm. "You are already in trouble," he said, sitting down in the wooden chair near the window. "I have been ranching in these parts for 30 years and I know the look of someone running from something. The question is whether you are running from the law or from something else entirely." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes and she looked down at her hands. "Not from the law," she said quietly. "From my brother. He wants to force me into a marriage with a man I do not love. A man who has money and influence but no kindness in his heart. When I refused, my brother became violent. He said I had no choice, that I would obey or he would make sure I regretted it. So I ran." Thomas was silent for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to determine whether she was telling the truth. Finally he stood and walked to the small stove in the corner of the room where a pot of coffee sat warming. He poured 2 cups and handed one to Sarah before sitting back down. "My wife passed away 5 years ago," he said, his voice taking on a distant quality. "We had been married for 32 years and in all that time I never once raised my hand to her or forced her to do anything against her will. She was my partner, my equal, and I loved her more than life itself. When she died, something in me died too, and I have been going through the motions ever since. Working the ranch day after day but never really living." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee before continuing. "I tell you this because I want you to understand something. A man who would force a woman into marriage against her will is no man at all. He is a coward and a bully, and he does not deserve your obedience or your fear." Sarah looked up at him, surprised by the passion in his voice. "But what can I do?" she asked. "My brother has friends everywhere. If I stay in one place too long he will find me, and when he does I do not know what he will do." Thomas set down his cup and leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers with steady resolve. "Then you will stay here," he said simply. "You will work on the ranch, earn your keep, and in return I will make sure your brother does not find you. If he does come looking, well, then we will deal with that when the time comes. But I will not turn you out into the wilderness to fend for yourself. That is not how I was raised, and it is not the kind of man I am." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of tension that had been there for so long she had almost forgotten it existed. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how to repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Thomas said, standing up. "Just do your share of the work and that will be enough. Now finish your coffee and then come out to the barn. There are horses that need tending and fences that need mending. We do not have time for idleness on this ranch." Over the following weeks Sarah settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She discovered that she had a natural way with the animals, especially the horses, who seemed to sense her gentle nature and respond to her touch. Thomas taught her how to mend fences, how to recognize when an animal was sick, and how to read the weather by watching the sky. In the evenings they would sit on the porch and talk about everything and nothing. Thomas told her stories about his late wife Margaret, about how they had built the ranch from nothing, working side by side through droughts and harsh winters and years when the cattle prices were so low they barely broke even. Sarah in turn shared memories of her childhood before her parents had died and her brother had become her guardian. She spoke of summers spent reading under the shade of old oak trees and winter evenings by the fire listening to her mother play the piano. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah began to notice small changes in Thomas. The lines around his eyes seemed less pronounced when he smiled, and he smiled more often now. There was a lightness to his step that had not been there before, and sometimes she would catch him humming old tunes while he worked. One evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Thomas turned to her and said something that took her by surprise. "You have brought life back to this place," he said. "When Margaret died I thought I would never feel anything again, but you have reminded me that there is still goodness in the world, still reasons to keep going." Sarah felt her cheeks warm with emotion. "You have saved my life," she replied. "Not just by giving me shelter but by showing me what kindness truly looks like. I had begun to believe that all men were like my brother, cruel and controlling, but you have proven me wrong." Thomas reached over and gently patted her hand. "Not all men are cruel, Sarah, and not all women need to be controlled. The best relationships are built on mutual respect and understanding. That is what Margaret and I had, and that is what I hope you will find someday when you are ready." But then one afternoon as Sarah was working in the garden she heard the sound of horses approaching. Her heart leapt into her throat and she dropped the trowel she had been holding. Thomas emerged from the barn, his expression serious as he took in the group of riders coming up the road. There were 5 of them, all rough-looking men with guns at their hips. At the front rode a man Sarah recognized immediately. Her brother James. She felt her legs go weak and she had to grip the fence post to keep from collapsing. Thomas walked over to her and placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Go inside," he said quietly. "Let me handle this." But Sarah shook her head. "No," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I will not hide anymore. If he has come for me, then I will face him." Thomas looked at her for a long moment and then nodded. "All right," he said. "But stay behind me." James and his men reined in their horses a few feet from where Thomas and Sarah stood. James was a tall man with dark hair and cold eyes that swept over the ranch with obvious disdain. "Sarah," he said, his voice hard. "It is time to come home. This foolishness has gone on long enough." Sarah stepped forward though her heart was pounding. "I am not going anywhere with you, James," she said. "I am staying here where I am safe and where I am treated with respect." James laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Respect," he said. "What do you know about respect? You are a woman, Sarah, and you will do as you are told. Now get your things or I will drag you back myself." Thomas stepped between them, his jaw set. "The lady has made her choice," he said. "She is not going with you." James' eyes narrowed as he looked Thomas up and down. "And who are you to tell me what to do with my own sister?" he demanded. "This is family business, old man. Stay out of it." Thomas did not flinch. "I am making it my business," he said calmly. "Sarah is under my protection now and I will not let you take her against her will. If you want her you will have to go through me." For a moment tension hung thick in the air and Sarah was certain that violence was about to erupt. But then something unexpected happened. One of the men riding with James, a younger man with kind eyes, shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "James," he said, "maybe we should listen to what Sarah wants. This does not feel right." James whirled on him, his face flushed with anger. "You dare question me?" he snarled. But before he could say more, another of the men spoke up. "The boy is right, James. If Sarah does not want to come, then maybe we should leave her be. Your father would not have wanted this." James looked around at his men and Sarah saw something shift in his expression. He had expected their support, their loyalty, but now he was seeing doubt in their eyes. Thomas took advantage of the moment, stepping forward. "You can leave peacefully," he said. "Or you can try to take her by force. But if you choose the latter, know that I have friends in this valley, men who will not stand by and watch a woman being dragged off against her will." James stared at Thomas for a long moment and then at Sarah. Finally he shook his head in disgust. "Fine," he spat. "Stay here then and rot in this backwater. But do not come crying to me when you realize what a mistake you have made." He yanked his horse around and spurred it down the road, his men following behind. Sarah watched them go, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. She had never wanted things to end this way with her family, but she knew that she had made the right choice. Thomas turned to her, his expression concerned. "Are you all right?" he asked. Sarah nodded, though tears were streaming down her face. "I am," she said. "Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for standing up for me." Thomas pulled her into a gentle embrace, patting her back awkwardly. "You are welcome here for as long as you need," he said. "This is your home now if you want it to be." Over the months that followed, Sarah truly did make the ranch her home. She and Thomas fell into an easy partnership, working side by side during the day and spending their evenings talking and laughing on the porch. The other ranchers in the valley came to know and respect her, and more than one young man tried to court her. But Sarah was not ready for that yet. She needed time to heal, to discover who she was outside of her brother's shadow. And Thomas never pushed her, never expected more from her than honest work and good company. One winter evening, as they sat by the fire, Thomas looked over at her with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "Margaret would have liked you. She always believed that people deserved second chances, that kindness was more powerful than cruelty. I think she would be happy knowing that you are here." Sarah smiled warmly. "I wish I could have met her," she said. Thomas nodded. "So do I," he said. "But in a way I think you have. She lives on in the way I try to treat people, in the lessons she taught me about love and respect. And now those lessons have been passed on to you." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. Again, but these were tears of gratitude, not sorrow. "You have taught me so much," she said. "About strength and kindness and what it means to truly care for someone. I will carry those lessons with me for the rest of my life." Thomas smiled, a rare full smile that lit up his weathered face. "And that," he said, "is the best legacy anyone could ask for." As the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. She had found more than shelter here on this remote ranch. She had found healing and hope in the understanding that true strength came not from control or dominance, but from compassion and the willingness to stand up for what was right. And in Thomas she had found not just a protector, but a true friend, someone who had shown her through his actions, not his words, what it meant to be a good and decent person. The ranch continued to thrive under their joint care, and as spring arrived, bringing with it new life and new possibilities, Sarah knew that whatever the future held, she would face it with courage. Because she had learned the most important lesson of all. That even in the darkest times there were still good people in the world. People who would stand beside you, who would fight for you, and who would show you that kindness was not weakness but the greatest strength of all. And that was a truth worth holding onto, no matter what storms might come.